This may just be the biggest ever Fanco wrestling show because of all the great upcoming wrestling matches. I'm going to be talking all about the great duels coming up in February, but I'm also going to be talking about the most anticipated duel of the year. Number 1 Iowa versus number 2 Penn State. You're not going to want to miss this. So let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to Fanco Wrestling. On this show, we talk all about wrestling news, but on this channel, we talk all about wrestling news, tips, and lifestyle. So if you're interested in those type of topics, if you are just a wrestling fan, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you can keep up to date with the latest going on in the world of wrestling. And speaking of the world of wrestling, we're going to jump right into these topics this week because like I said at the beginning of the show, there's so much to talk about. So let's talk about what's going on in the world of wrestling. I just want to recap a couple of different things that happened over the last weekend. I mean, one of the biggest weekends in wrestling so far this season because of all the duels and all of the upsets, really. Just so much to talk about. And first of all was Friday night. Friday night was wild. I mean, it was kind of funny because I personally had my iPad. I was watching on my iPad and my TV. I had both putting wrestling matches on as I was texting people about the matches, all the crazy things going on, looking at the tweets, looking at everything going on. I mean, it was just wild. First starting off with UNC and Virginia Tech, and same time going on was Penn State and Nebraska. And then, of course, after that was Iowa and Ohio State. And there's just so much to talk about in all of those. If you missed it, I did talk about the UNC match with the Monday and McFadden, which was really the biggest match of that duel. Whenever Kennedy Monday just Tech followed David McFadden, number 3 in the country, and you can check out my video all about that. But that's basically it, and that UNC just totally just beat down Virginia Tech, which was nobody really saw coming. It was a match that I was anticipating, but it was an exciting duel nonetheless. Penn State, Nebraska. You know, a couple good matches, kind of starting out strong was Roman Bravo Young. Then getting a little bit into the middle of that lineup was Verclaren just getting pinned off of a shot. Not the best thing to happen to him, not best for Penn State, but luckily with a senior like Mark Hall who can come in there, get the job done with a pin and bring it back on top. And of course, Seth Neville's clinching the match for the Penn State Nittany Lions. And then Iowa versus Ohio State. I mean, Iowa just absolutely dominated Ohio State 24-10. But one big thing, and one thing I will be talking about in a little bit, is guys not wrestling. And that was a big pet peeve of mine. Now, we did get the Sammy Sasso versus Pat Lugo match, which is very exciting, lived up to it. A couple things didn't necessarily go Iowa's way during that match, but I'll get to that in just a little bit as well. But Ohio State did bounce back, ended up defeating Minnesota 22-13. However, Michigan did lose this weekend to Illinois 20-13, which was kind of a big win. I mean, kind of towards the end of the rankings, towards that 25 through 30 range is where those teams fall, but I'll also be talking about rankings in this show. Now, before I get into the main topic, number 1 today, I want to talk about the sponsor of this video. This video is brought to you by Be Superior Wrestling. Be Superior Wrestling is a great wrestling street brand that you can wear when you're off the mat. They also have great shirts that you can wear on the street. You can wear it during a workout. They have great headbands. You can see me wearing that in my last video. It's actually very comfortable, all of it, and I really highly recommend that. You can check out the link in the description below. That'll take you straight to Be Superior Wrestling's website. Now, with that being said, let's dive into today's topics. What is the most annoying thing in college wrestling? I'll tell you what it is. It's when teams don't wrestle their best guys. It is one of the most annoying things going on in college wrestling today. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because of the Ohio State and Iowa match, whenever Iowa didn't wrestle 2 of their best guys. And I actually have a couple different worst case examples of this that I want to discuss, and I want to discuss why it's bad for the sport, but also why it keeps happening. Now, what's going on? Are guys not wrestling because they're hurt? Are they injured? Are their grades bad? Are they just dodging wrestlers? Most of the time, I think it's just they're dodging wrestlers. Now, in the in the Iowa and Ohio State match, of course, one of the biggest matchups was Max Mirren versus Luke Pletcher, as well as Jacob Warren versus Colin Moore. Two number one ranked wrestlers for Ohio State, and Iowa just didn't wrestle them. They did not wrestle Ohio State's quote unquote best guys, which was very unfortunate to see. I mean, for me personally, as a wrestling fan, I was looking forward to those matches. Please let me know what your thoughts are on this before I continue on with this little bit of a rant here. Now, another bad scenario in being a Penn State fan, yes, I have seen this as well. Whenever Shakur Rasheed did not wrestle in the past last season against Miles Martin multiple times. I went to the Ohio State match last season, and Shakur did not wrestle Miles Martin. Penn State actually ended up bumping up Mason Manville to wrestle him instead, as well as not wrestling at the Big Ten tournament. Now, there's some things with Shakur, being injured, and of course that kind of continued on into this season, so I give a little bit of leeway there. However, it's still very annoying and upsetting. And then Big Ten's 2018, I mean, that was one of the biggest things, is that Suriano didn't wrestle. Jason Nolf didn't wrestle. Kemmer didn't wrestle. Wick didn't wrestle. I mean, so many guys just medically forfeited out of the tournament. They get their wins in, they qualify for nationals, then they're done. It's a shame. So why does this keep happening? I mean, it's mostly because of rankings. A loss is seen worse than just not wrestling a guy or medically forfeiting. And in that case, that's kind of hurting guys. It's kind of bumping them down. If they have that lone loss on the record or two losses or whatever it is on the record, it's a blemish to the people who are ranking, which is, I mean, people rank differently, but that's really a big thing, is losses, big losses. And, if a guy's actually injured, if a guy's actually out for a certain reason, it's obviously understandable. I mean, you aren't going to wrestle every single match, not necessarily. And coaches do at times want to try different guys in the lineup. However, when this keeps happening, to me, it's one of the most annoying things going on in college wrestling today. And please let me know if you think that it's that bad. The next thing I want to talk about, Let's discuss Sammy Sasso's stellar weekend, and really a stellar season so far by the Buckeye Sammy Sasso. Now, Sammy Sasso, let's discuss kind of his progression throughout the season. At the beginning of the season, he started out number five in the country at 149 pounds. Why was he number 5? Well, coming out of high school, 2-time PIAA state champion, and he placed top 3 all 4 of his seasons. He was Ironman champ, Beast of the East champ, as well as a Fargo champ. He's from Nazareth, Pennsylvania. But going into college, he was 19-2 as a redshirt with wins over Josh Maruka from Arizona State, as well as Brayton Lee, who we'll get to that in just a minute. But right now in college wrestling, he is number 2 in the country at 149 pounds. And there's a reason, obviously, he's on number 2 in the country. Earlier in the season, he did kind of have a blemish. He was pinned by Brent Moore of Virginia Tech during that duel with Ohio State. Big upset for Ohio State as well as for Sammy Sasso, obviously. And he kind of got caught going in off of a shot to Brent Moore, got caught and pinned and stuck. And we saw that once Sasso wrestled Moore again, he did end up avenging that victory at Cliff Keen, Las Vegas. Unfortunately for him, he did lose to Brayton Lee at Cliff Keen. He lost 6-4. It was a close match. But, a win and a loss there. Since then, one of his best wins has come over Josh Maruka of Arizona State. And then, obviously, last weekend, he had a stellar weekend, beating Pat Lugo 2-1 in overtime in the Ohio State versus Iowa match, as well as beating Brayton Lee 4-2. Now, discussing each of these matches, the first match with Pat Lugo, what a match. I mean, these two guys just going at it the whole time. Sasso is a little bit more defensive, whereas Lugo is on the attack the whole time. And if you're a Hawkeyes fan, yes, I kind of see where you were a little bit upset. Where's the stall call? Where's, the locked hands was another question. I don't think there's necessarily locked hands, but then really the biggest question at the end of the match came when whether Lugo had the cradle locked in off of a shot, and did he actually have 2 there on Sasso? That's the question. Personally, I thought he did have it, even though I was kind of cheering on Sasso. I thought that he had two there at the end was Lugo, but the refs didn't see it that way, and ultimately Sasso won that match. And then Brayton Lee match, I mean, another one where Sasso was a little bit more defensive, but he kind of learned from that Lugo match that he had to be a little bit more on the offense. Wasn't as much, still kind of more defensive, and ended up kind of scoring off of Brayton Lee's shots, but he did get that victory. Now, the thing is, like, why is he number 2 now? Why isn't he number 1 since Lugo was number 1? Very, very good question, very rational question, and the reason is this. So Sasso was number 6 in the country coming into this weekend. He beat number 1 Lugo and number 4 in Brayton Lee. Now, Boo Llewellyn is number 1 in the country now from Oklahoma State, and recently he had a win over Max Thompson of UNI, former All-American. And the reason, as I said, that that Sasso isn't number 1 is because Llewellyn's undefeated, and Sasso does have a couple of those blemishes. He has a couple of losses, and he hasn't wrestled Llewellyn. I mean, if he wrestled him, he beat him, yeah, then he'll be number 1. That's kind of how that works. But Lugo, throughout the season, this has been a weight that's just been constantly in fluctuation, constantly changing. Lugo had a win over Austin O'Connor, who was number 1 at the beginning of the season, going into Midlands, but ultimately lost at Midlands and when Lugo beat him. And then, Brock Mahler just sitting on the outside. He doesn't have any wins over any of these top guys, so that's kind of hurting, even though he is 20-1. Now, how these new rankings go: Llewellyn's number 1, Sasso 2, Lugo 3, Brayton Lee 4, and Austin O'Connor 5. With then obviously, like I said, Mahler falling in at number 6. Sammy Sasso, can he be a national champion? Let me know in the comments below. Let's move on to, this topic is big. And let me take a gulp of water before we move on to this topic, talking about Iowa and Penn State. Now, Iowa versus Penn State. Can the Nittany Lions get it done against the Iowa Hawkeyes? That is the biggest question heading into this weekend. So, first of all, the last win that Iowa had over Penn State was actually in 2015. So Penn State is known to beat Iowa over the last couple of years. They kind of beat them pretty bad in 2017, 2018. They did not wrestle last season. Now, like I said, Penn State's won big over the last couple of years, winning by scores of 28-13, 26-11, a closer duel in 2015, but the Hawkeyes came out on top 18-12. But Penn State has won 6 out of the last 10 duels. So can they get it done this time? That's really the question here. Now, these are the projected lineups right now for the duel on Friday. And let's just go through this and discuss how Penn State could possibly beat the number 1 ranked Iowa Hawkeyes, because the Hawkeyes are the clear favorites going into this match. Obviously, Penn State with a loss already on the season to Arizona State, early season loss, but they looked pretty good against Nebraska. A couple of upsetting losses in the lineup, but overall, the team looked pretty good. Starting off pretty strong, I'm going to kind of go through some scoring scenarios. I've already discussed the Penn State versus Iowa complete predictions and lineups in another video, but in this, I'm just going to go through how Penn State could win. So let's start off with the facts. Okay, so Spencer Lee at 125, if we start at 125, Spencer Lee is a bonus point machine. He has won every single match but won by tech fall or pin this year. And the one match that he didn't, he won by major decision. So he's 100% bonus point percentage this year. I don't think unfortunately for Penn State, I don't think that's going to change with Meredith. I think that Spencer Lee's probably going to get that tech fall or a pin here. So let's assume he gets a tech fall. Moving on to 133. DeSanto and Roman Bravo Young. This is a marquee matchup right here. Number 2 versus number 4. But it's really a toss-up. I mean, I will say DeSanto, yes, he won the last 2 of these matches, and he's been the dominant wrestler. Roman Bravo Young, though, right now, he's kind of on a roll. Had an excellent match against Rutgers, and then last week against Nebraska, had another solid match. This match, if Penn State wants to win, Rome Bravion is going to have to pull something out and beat Austin DeSanto. That's just one thing that's just going to have to happen. And another thing that's going to have to happen is Nick Lee moving on to 141. Nick Lee's going to have to get that victory over Max Murin. We didn't see Max Murin wrestle last week against Luke Pletcher, whether that was some sort of ploy, whether that was, whatever that was, he didn't wrestle last week. But Nick Lee has just been, he's really been the best. He's coming into, I think, the peak of his career, the best he's ever wrestled in college. He's just absolutely annihilating. He's won 92% of his matches this year by bonus point decision. He's undefeated, 12-0. He majored Chad Red, as well as Murin actually lost to Chad Red this season. So going up against that Nebraska match, I really do believe, that Nick Lee and Max Murin, they've wrestled a similar amount of competition this year. However, I think Nick Lee's just looking very, very dominant, and I'm going to have to say Nick Lee can get that. If he can get that major decision, that's going to help push Penn State to where they need to be. Moving on to 149. 149 is going to be another interesting matchup with Lugo and Verclaren. Now, Verclaren, one interesting thing while I was looking at some of these stats and some of the lineups, Verclaren has actually never lost a match by greater than a decision. So yes, he's lost matches. Yes, he's lost a decent amount of matches. However, he's never lost a match by decision unless it was by fall. He was pinned, I believe, twice in his career. Last week was one of them against Nebraska. Shot in and ultimately was pinned. So besides getting pinned, he's never lost a match by greater than a decision. Lugo's coming off his sudden victory loss to Sammy Sasso, but he's looking strong this season. Really, I think Lugo is the favorite here, and let's assume that he gets the decision. So at this point, heading into the match, it's 8-7 in favor of Iowa. So Penn State obviously is going to need to do something very big here. And moving on to 157 at the halfway point in the match, Berge and Pfeiffer or against Caleb Young. Now, here's the thing. We haven't really seen Berge wrestle at all this year. He wrestled once in a Lehigh match, and we've seen Pfeiffer wrestle every single other match. I think that, if Penn State, they could be saving him for this particular match. And if they are, that's big. We've seen Penn State do things like this in the past. We've seen them save guys or not wrestle guys and just to wrestle them against Iowa or Ohio State. It's happened in the past. It will probably happen again. Now, Brady Berge going into the season was like top 5, 6, 7. The last time he was in the rankings was actually just a couple weeks ago. Whenever Flo finally took him out of the rankings, he was number 7. On the opposite side is Caleb Young, who's number 4 in the country with a couple losses on the season to David Carr, Quincy Monday, one of his best wins over Hartman. Over Hartman at Midlands, that was one of his best victories. Now, Pfeiffer 8-9 on the season, so if he wrestles, it's going to be a little bit of a different story. But if Berge wrestles, we're going to assume here, because this is the part of the video we're discussing how Penn State can win. If Berge wrestles and beats Caleb Young, that'll be big for the Nittany Lions. I think that's something that needs to happen in order for the Nittany Lions to win. Now, let's move on to 165, another marquee matchup. This is, it's really, I would call this the match of the night. I would call this the match of the night because, number 1 versus number 2, Vincenzo Joseph versus Alex Marinelli. Vincenzo had never beat Marinelli before in his career. Could this be the time that Vincenzo finally beats Marinelli? We'll see. It's in Carver Hawkeye, which is going to be, a little bit of an atmosphere change. We've already seen Marinelli beat Vincenzo where it matters in his home field at Penn State, but this time in Carver Hawkeye, what can happen? And that's going to be a key factor. Now, as I mentioned, Marinelli has beat him twice in the past. However, Vincenzo has placed higher than Marinelli at Nationals. We'll see. If Vincenzo can score off of something other than those kind of over or under hooks, I think then he's going to have a little bit better of a shot at Marinelli. And obviously he's been training since last year to beat him, and I know he's in that room with Kale trying to figure out a way to do that. Let's assume here that Vincenzo gets the victory over Marinelli just because really, at the end of the day, they need it. They need it. At 174, moving on to 174, Mark Hall against Michael Kemmerer. This is an exciting match. People have been looking forward to this match all year, mostly because we haven't seen Kemmerer up at 174. We've seen Hall at 74, haven't seen Kemmerer. Last time we saw him was at 157. He was wrestling Jason Nolf. Now, last time that a couple of these guys wrestled. Now, Kemmerer's kind of been on and off all season. He's 8-0 to Hall's 16-0. So Hall's wrestled obviously double the amount of matches that he has. And last week, it was a big match for Mark Hall where he pinned Labriola, helped the Penn State win the match, win the duel, which is absolutely massive. He also has a win over Cutler, who's one of the top 5 in the country right now, whereas Kemmerer's just kind of coming off of a relatively close match with Labriola. Now, I think Hall is really coming into it this season, really being a strong wrestler, a dominant wrestler, and let's just call because Penn State needs it, and because we're saying how can they win, let's give Mark Hall the major decision. They're up 17-8, and at this point in the match, they're going to need it because the last 3 matches for the Hawkeyes, it's going to be very, very difficult to win really any of those. So let's discuss this next match. Assad or possibly Brands versus Aaron Brooks. Brooks, of course, number 10 in the country. Assad is number 8, and I mentioned Assad, I mentioned Brands, and even at 197, I'm going to mention Cash Wilkie because we could see these guys bumping anywhere. We saw Wilkie wrestle last week bumping up to 197, which was a little bit different for the Hawkeyes there. So we could see anything happen here. Could we see a Michael Beard come out for Penn State? I don't know. It's unlikely, but you never know with these two teams. So, Assad against Brooks. Now, Assad has a win over Venz this season, whereas, if you watched the Nebraska match last week, Brooks didn't necessarily have the best match against him. Honestly, Venz just kind of dominated him. Now, the one thing I want to mention is that Assad already on the year has a couple losses coming from opens at the beginning of the season from Grandview, and that was one of the losses that he had on the season. Whereas, whereas Brooks needs to. I think what I'm trying to say here is that both of these guys are beatable. I don't think Assad's untouchable. I don't think Brooks is untouchable. I think both these guys coming in as true freshmen are able to be beat, and I think that'll make for an exciting match. Now, let's give this one to Aaron Brooks, making it now 20-8 in favor of the Nittany Lions. Now, I was going to have to pull out something big here if they want to win at this point in the duel. And going into that point is going to be number 4 Warner versus number 15 Rashid. And I already mentioned Wilkie could be coming out at 197. You never know. Of course, we've seen Rashid and Wilkie wrestle in the past, but down a weight, whereas Rashid actually won that match. It may have been by a major decision, I believe. But we're probably going to see Jake Warner here up at 197. Both recent losses to Nebraska, whereas Rashid's only on his 5th match back. And quite honestly, against Nebraska, he didn't really look that great. He wasn't taking shots at the end of the match whenever he needed to take shots to win, which just drove me bananas. But I think that because of that, we're going to have to give this win to Jacob Warner over Shakur Rashid, and that's going to propel us to the last match of the duel, which is going to be Seth Nevels against Anthony Cassiope. Cassiope wrestling some of the best he's been all season, has seen better competition than Nevels has all season. But Nevels, while he's wrestled some good guys this season, hasn't seen the amount of competition. I mean, he does have strong wins over Nebraska, Rutgers, Illinois, Northwestern. Last year, in his redshirt year, his best win was over Yusuf Hamida, as well as Borst and Isaac Reed. Those were some strong victories. But Cassiope's just been trucking his way to the top from the very beginning of the season with wins over Trent Hilger, Gannon Gremmel, Matt Stencil at Midlands. He's just been consistently winning. I don't think he's necessarily been doing anything that crazy special as a wrestler, but he's just been winning. And because of that, because of that, I'm going to have to give the match here to Penn State by a score of 20-14. So let's look at these lineups one last time. Of course, I'm mentioning the marquee matchups here, guys. The marquee matchups that Penn State needs to win are 133, 141, and really 165. If they can find a way to win those three matches, then Penn State has a chance. They're going to have to find a way to get bonus points. And, as we know, with Penn State, they find a way to win. And with that, can the Nittany Lions do it? We'll see this Friday. But let's shift over now. And let me take another sip. So, in that other topic, we discussed how Penn State could beat Iowa. Now, let's shift over and discuss how Iowa could possibly shut out Penn State. Is that possible? Let's get into it. So, I usually don't like to discuss who I think is going to win, who I think is going to lose exactly, because, anything can happen. People tend to, kind of jump on that. I like to discuss here, though, what the Hawkeyes need to do or what Penn State needs to do in order to win. And let's look at these lineups here. So, looking at the lineup, it's going to be an intense duel, guys. It's going to be an intense duel from top to bottom. And now, Iowa has won a lot of their matches at home against Penn State. 2 out of the last 4 home duels, they've beat Penn State. Their last big win against Penn State was actually in 2008. They beat them in 2015. That was the last win against Penn State. However, the last big win by a big deficit, 27-13, was when Iowa won in 2008. That was one of their biggest deficits that they won, and they won 4 out of the last 10 duels. So, it's obviously they are doing great this season as well as in past seasons, but they're on the revenge tour now. They just beat Ohio State. Now they're on to Penn State, and they're on a tear. So let's discuss what needs to happen. The first thing is getting into Spencer Lee. Okay, Spencer Lee, obviously, is a guy who scored 100% bonus points this entire season. He's won every match by fall or tech fall, except for one where he actually won by major decision. So every other match, he just absolutely crushed it. And because of that, let's say Spencer Lee gets the pin here. He's going to win by bonus, is just by the stats, by how he's been looking this year. Moving on to 133. 133 is going to be an interesting match because, look, DeSanto and RBY, they've wrestled in the past, and DeSanto has won twice. Going by those standards, going by the fact that DeSanto's won at Big Ten, she's won at Nationals against Roman Bravo Young, let's give DeSanto that victory, just going by nothing on the nothing but the facts. And like I said, anything could happen in these duels, but anyways, leave a comment down below what you think is going to happen in this match and what you actually think is going to happen. Moving on to 141. This will be a good matchup with Nick Lee and Max Murin. Now, Murin and Lee have seen kind of the same difficulty in competition, the same roughness in competition this entire season so far. Lee is 2-0 against Murin with a 92% bonus point percentage, which is just about as close to Spencer Lee as you can. Maybe it's because of the last name. Maybe there's something up with Lee this season. Really, we could see potentially 3 national champs with the last name Lee this year, with Spencer Lee, Nick Lee, as well as Brayton Lee at 149. Just saying. Very possible. Now, anyways, going by the fact that Nick Lee has beat Max Murin in the past, let's call that it's going to happen again and give that win to Penn State, and that could be their win. Now, it could switch in the opposite direction, in which case I would still be shutting out Penn State up to this point in the match. Moving on to Verclaren and Lugo at 149. Now, Verclaren and Lugo is going to be kind of an interesting match because by nothing more than the fact that Verclaren has never lost a match by greater than decision, except for the times that he was pinned, which is only twice. One of them being last weekend against Nebraska, whenever Verclaren shot in. It was just a bad pin, getting caught, getting stuck at that point last weekend. Now, because of that, I don't think that, Lugo, listen, he has a chance to score some points on Penn State, possibly get a major, possibly get some points on the board. And because they're in their home arena at this point, they know they need to win after a possible last loss to Nick Lee, and the Hawkeyes are going to be rebounding here. Lugo is going to score some points. Let's call it that Lugo scores a major decision against Verclaren, and he's already had a win over O'Connor. Although he did have a loss to Sasso last week, this could be very interesting indeed. But moving on to 157 with Caleb Young and Pfeiffer or Berge. Now, here's the thing. We could see Pfeiffer wrestle, but we could also see Brady Berge. And we really don't know who we're going to see at this point. But we haven't seen Berge wrestle all season. I think this is going to be, Penn State knows what they're doing already, whether they're going to wrestle Berge or not, who at that point in the season, when he was taken out of the lineup or taken out of the rankings, he was top 7 in the country, whereas Young's number 4 right now. So, if he wrestles, that'd be a good match, but I'm going to have to give this to Young, just going by the fact that Pfeiffer's 8-9 on the season right now, while Young has had some solid wins. But 165, the best match of the night. Number 1 versus number 2. Chenzo versus the Bull. Who you got? Who do you think's going to win this match? Going by the stats right now, Alex Marinelli has beat Vincenzo Joseph twice in the past. Although Vincenzo has placed higher than him at nationals every single year consistently, Marinelli just finds a way to beat Vincenzo. The last time in the Big Ten Championships last year, really, Vincenzo went for those overhooks and underhooks, and Marinelli just wasn't letting him get that. He wasn't letting him have it, and kind of tossed Vincenzo and really handled him. I doubt we'll see him handle him that much in this match. Obviously, both of them have been working to beat the other, but with Marinelli coming off of wins against Wick, White, and McFadden, as well as Hartman, those have been some excellent wins this season, whereas Vincenzo still undefeated on the season, just half the matches as Marinelli actually, but he does have wins over White as well as Shields. But going by past history, we're going to give this victory to Marinelli. And at this point in the match, with the scores that I've been putting in, it's 18-3 in favor of the Hawkeyes. So we're kind of close to that shutout. Going back to that Nick Lee match, he needs a win in order for Penn State not to get shut out. However, the one match that Penn State does really have going for them, I believe, is at 174 with Mark Hall against Michael Kemmerer. Kemmerer, of course, bumping up to 174 this year, and we just haven't seen him wrestle against Mark Hall yet, so it'll be interesting to see how they do. Hall is coming off of a massive pin last week against Labriola, whereas Kemmerer kind of had a close match with him, and because of that, I'm going to give this match just a decision to Mark Hall. Now, moving on to 184, let's talk about Assad and Brooks. Assad and Brooks. So, 2 true freshmen, and we could see anybody come out here. We could see Brands come out. We could see Wilkie come out. We could even see maybe bumping up at 197 and Michael Beard come out for Penn State. You don't know what Kale has in his back pocket. You don't know what Tom Brands has in his back pocket. These guys have been up and down all year. Wilkie, of course, wrestled 197 last week against Ohio State, whereas Warner did not wrestle. So, anyways, at 184, number 8 Assad versus number 10 Brooks. This is a match I think can go either way. We've already seen Assad lose a couple times on the season, although he has had some excellent victories, of course, including over Venz, whereas Brooks has had a loss to Venz. Going off of those common opponents, I'm going to have to give that match to Assad, pushing the Hawkeye score 21-6, and at 197, Rashid and Warner. Now, here's the unfortunate thing if you're a Penn State fan. Rashid is coming off of that shoulder injury. He's coming off of a hurt shoulder and a hurt, past many, many months. This will be his 5th match of the year, only his 5th match of the year, whereas Warner's coming off of a pretty strong record. I believe he's 10-3 right now is his record. So he's just been wrestling better competition. Wins over Brucky, over Bruner of Purdue. Just been wrestling better. Whereas Rashid, let's look at last week. Shakur, unfortunately, he was down in the 3rd, and all he needed to do was shoot, and he wasn't even shooting. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when, you're down. You know you have to take a shot. You know you have to score. Why are you just not doing anything? Just blows my mind. But anyway, because of that, I'm going to have to give this decision to the higher ranked wrestler in Jacob Warner. And that brings us to heavyweight with Anthony Cassiope versus Seth Nevels. Now, we've seen this season so far, Cassiope has faced better competition. His wins over Trent Helger, Gannon Grummel, and Matt Stencil at Midlands. He's just been consistent every single match. Interestingly enough, though, number 16, Seth Nevels, he is undefeated, but he doesn't have any real ranked wins this season. Doesn't mean anything. Both these guys had solid redshirt years last year, and I'm sure that this will be a great match. Especially, let's say that for whatever reason, it does come down to this final match, that will make it even more exciting. That means let's go with the higher wrestler here, just for you Hawkeyes fans. Let's go with the higher wrestler here, and number 3 Cassiope making the score by decision, making the score 27-3 in favor of the Hawkeyes. And of course, here in this graph, you can see Cassiope having a strong lift against Traub in the Ohio State duel. But let's look at these final scores. And 27-6, with Penn State's only 2 victories coming from Nick Lee and Mark Hall. What do you think? What do you think about these scores? Do you think they're correct? Do you think they're incorrect? Do you think I'm absolutely crazy right now? Please let me know what you think in the comments below. And with that being said, let's get ready to move on to the next topic. But first, I want to make a bold prediction. Now, I've already in this episode discussed how Penn State can beat Iowa, how Iowa can beat Penn State, but what is my personal prediction? And yes, both of those scores that I had for those matches were kind of extremes, because obviously Penn State winning a bunch of those matches and Iowa winning a bunch of their matches. I mean, it's not all going to happen. Both sides are going to win some, lose some. I mean, most likely. It's just, that's how the wrestling rules go. That's how wrestling matches happen. They wrestle to see who's the best, and that's what happens all the time. Now, as I personally have it, and I'm not going to go through my whole lineup here, I just want to discuss what my score is. My score, as I have it, is 17-17. 17-17. Now, each team has 5 victories. Penn State has a couple more bonus point victories, but they have pretty strong bonus point victories at the beginning with Iowa. So who wins in my scenario? Well, I think it's 17-17. We go to the tiebreaker. And the tiebreaker, one of the first tiebreakers, is penalties by a team. And because Iowa's going to get one penalty, whether it's by a wrestler talking trash when he's not supposed to, or a shove, or some sort of unsportsmanlike, or Tom Brand stepping onto the mat, which we saw last week in the match against Ohio State. Because of that, Penn State's going to get the victory and win on the tiebreaker. Just a bold prediction. Please let me know what you think of that. Is that prediction absolutely wild? Yes, it really is. Let's move on to the next topic. The next real main topic. Fanco rankings. So one thing I want to discuss here is the Fanco rankings show. And this is an idea that I had for the future, whether I want to go each week and discuss what I believe the rankings are, as well as, it's the wins and the losses of the major programs in the country. And please, if you're interested in this type of topic, in this type of show, please comment below. It's something that I'm really willing to do, and something that I love discussing and talking about. Something that I do anyways, is go through the ranking and see who I think should be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to number 30 every single week. So with that being said, let's discuss, where the teams lie this week. And, just saying, I do have an idea to do some sort of I won't give everything away, but this also, this should be fun. So let's discuss the top 10 teams in the country right now, where they should be ranked, according to Fanco Wrestling. So the number 1 team far and away is Iowa. I mean, they're 8-0. They're undefeated on the season, have very strong wins over, 4 top 25 programs, and a win over Ohio State last week. there's no contest. They're number one. Number two, Penn State. Penn State, with their strong victory over Nebraska, although they do have the blemish of Arizona State at the beginning of the season, a couple guys out of their lineup kind of gives a little bit of lenience why they can be ranked at number two, and that's why I believe that they should be 7-1. Ohio State. Now, Ohio State coming off of a loss against Iowa really doesn't mean much. As far as the ranking, that's where they are. They lost to the number one team. We'll see how they do against Penn State in February, but they do have very strong victories the rest of the season. Now, they do have a loss earlier in the season to Virginia Tech, but they just keep moving up with that win last week over Minnesota, unfortunately with a loss to Iowa, but they're 8-2. Number 4 is NC State. Now, although they are the only other undefeated team besides Iowa, the reason that they're this low, and I mean number 4 in the country is pretty darn high, but number 4 I have them because their wins aren't necessarily massive wins. One of their best wins is over Cornell this year, who is a little bit down this year with a lot of their wrestlers taking the Olympic red shirt. They've still a very strong wrestling, a strong team. However, not as strong as a victory over some of these other top 10 programs. Their other best win is over Princeton, but they are undefeated this year. Last week, just beating Virginia. We'll see how strong of a program they are coming into the rest of the season. And they could potentially crack top 3 if they end up undefeated on the year. Now, at number 5 is Arizona State, 9-1 on the year. They need a win over UNC really to really show that they are that strong of a program. That's really going to keep pushing them potentially up. But that win over Penn State's really keeping them in the top 10 right now, or top 5, which is where they deserve to be, obviously, as a team with many, many great ranked wrestlers like the Valencias, like the Bullards. But at number 6, or excuse me, like the Valencias, Bullards are with NC State, but looking at both lineups here. At number 6 is Nebraska. Nebraska with a loss last week to Penn State, previously another loss to Iowa, and a loss to Wisconsin, but with a victory last week over Michigan State. With their ranked wrestlers, they deserve to be in that sixth spot. And UNC, excellent victory last week. Excellent victory over Virginia Tech. The official rankings have UNC below Virginia Tech right now, which is absolutely bonkers. It's horrible. Like, why on earth is UNC below Virginia Tech when they just beat them? Doesn't make sense. Virginia Tech should go 1 below UNC, and UNC should bump up to that number 7 because of their stronger wins throughout the season than even programs like Wisconsin and like Pitt, who do have strong wins, just not as strong as UNC now, who is just constantly winning, beating Michigan at the beginning of the season, then Princeton, and now Virginia Tech. They do have that loss to Stanford at the beginning of the season, but since then they've rattled off I think it was 8 straight wins. Solid season for UNC. Virginia Tech, great wins, great win over Ohio State, but now with that loss to UNC, they kind of shift down to that 8 spot where they were number 3 before, and that's kind of why teams like Ohio State, NC State, Arizona State all just shifted up one, which is where they deserve to be. Number 9 is Wisconsin, and who didn't wrestle last week, as well as number 10, Pitt, who beat Duke and Edinburgh. Not any massive teams that they beat, but they just shifted up, or actually they even stayed the same because UNC ended up shifting up. Now, moving on into that 11 through 30 range, and I'm not going to go through the rest of these teams. I just want to show you what my rankings are, where I believe that the teams need to be. Let's discuss a couple things in general. Oklahoma State, their loss hurts the team, and that hurts other teams too, who kind of had although they had that match earlier in the season with Lehigh, now that kind of devalues Lehigh and pushes them down, in my opinion. That's kind of why teams like Princeton, Minnesota are up there, whereas some of these other teams are down a little bit lower. The other big loss of the week was Michigan losing to Illinois. Just hurts the team and kind of shifts Illinois into that top 25, whereas Michigan shifts out for whatever reason. In the official rankings, the coaches and the rankers don't believe that Illinois is that top 25 team. I believe with that win, they move up one. It's the dual rankings. It's like college football. That's just how it should be. So again, if you're interested in this type of topic, in this type of in-depth conversation, please leave a comment below. If you don't leave comments, I don't know whether to do things or not, whether you like things or not. So leave a comment below whether this is something you're interested in or not. And maybe may actually even become an exclusive show on my Patreon page, which isn't set up yet, but I'm just kind of playing around with that idea. But please, again, let me know what you think of that. Now let's move on to main topic number 6. Another sip of water. Excuse me. Main topic number 6. Let's discuss every single undefeated college wrestling team since 2015. Every single undefeated team since 2015. So, first of all, let's discuss this year. This year, right now, there are 2 undefeated teams. We started out the year back in December. There were 6, 7, 8 undefeated teams, including Iowa, NC State, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Arizona State, Penn State. I don't think I said them yet. Virginia Tech. All these undefeated teams, and now we're down to 2. I mean, that's why we wrestle. We wrestle to see which teams are undefeated. The funny thing is, I believe at that point I had NC State, and they had the best chances of going undefeated. Iowa was a little bit lower. Penn State was a little bit lower, but obviously Penn State lost out early on. But let's talk about which teams are undefeated right now. The first team that is undefeated, obviously, are the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa already defeated strong opponents in Iowa State, Wisconsin, Nebraska. They've defeated 4 top 25 opponents, which is darn impressive for the Hawkeyes. But they're on their revenge tour now. Last week they beat Ohio State. This week they have Penn State, then Michigan and Oklahoma State coming up. Got to beat both of those teams to stay alive in that revenge tour. I think it's possible that they beat all 3. It's also possible that they could lose one. You never know. But they could end up, if they win the rest of their season and win out, they could end up 13-0. The other undefeated team this year, which has slowly become one of my other favorite college wrestling teams to watch, is NC State. Mostly because of the Hidleys, Hayden, as well as Trent. I mean, those 2 have just been on fire this year. I love watching those 2, both Pennsylvania boys. Now, NC State is a program. The last loss was actually to Pitt at the end of last season. They will be wrestling them again this year. Pitt is a top 10 program right now. They deserve to be there. They also have number 8 UNC coming up in February in just 2 weeks, which I really want to be at that duel. I really want to be there, as well as Virginia Tech, upcoming Virginia Tech, who UNC just beat. Virginia Tech was undefeated coming into this week. Now, they've already defeated Cornell and Princeton, their 2 best wins. If they win out the rest of the season, they will end up 15-0, making Iowa and NC State some of the best programs that we've seen go undefeated. Now, there are actually only 2 more programs that have been undefeated since 2015. And of course, I don't even need to say much more. You guys already know that this next team is Penn State. And there is one more surprise team that if you are just new to college wrestling, maybe you don't know about them, but they have had the best undefeated season out of any of these teams in the last 5-6 years. So, over the last couple of years, Penn State's been undefeated from 2015 to 2019. They've been undefeated. Of course, their loss coming to Arizona State this year. They could still be undefeated, but they have that blemish on the record now. In 2018, a couple of their big wins over Arizona State was whenever Hall defeated Valencia in the dual meet. In Michigan, that was another big win that year in 2018-2019. In Ohio State, whenever Nickel defeated Moore and Nick Lee defeated Joey McKenna in the duel. I was at that duel. Great match. They ended their season actually with a win over Buffalo, which kind of an anticlimactic win at the end of the season, which I'll get to in just a couple seconds about great ends of the season for Penn State. In 2017, 2018, this is where Penn State was also 14-0 the last 3 seasons. Excluding this one, they were 14-0. Their big wins were over Ohio State, Minnesota, Iowa, and they ended the season with a 55-0 victory over Buffalo yet again. And this was the year that Ohio State was supposed to beat Penn State in 2017, 2018, and didn't because Kassar bumped it in the lineup, wrestled more, beat more. Bo Nickel wrestled Miles Martin. Big victory for the team, as well as Neville's. This is an easily forgotten about match, but Neville's and Kyle Snyder. I mean, the momentum was so hype going on that weekend in Rec Hall that Neville's almost, I don't want to say he almost beat Kyle Snyder, but he was taking him down quite a few times. Like, it was absolutely wild. But that clinched Penn State the trophy that year. And then the last 2 years, 2016 and 2015, Penn State was 14-0 and 16-0 respectively. And these were a little bit more exciting years because this is when they ended their season with wins against Oklahoma State in the NWCA dual championships. And these were very exciting matches back in the times whenever they were still wrestling the dual meet championships, and that was an exciting time. I wish it still happened. A couple of other big duels during those years in 2015, 2016 was whenever Nolf wrestled against Illinois, ended up pinning Imar, massive. That was one of the biggest victories that year. And anyways, let's move on to the last undefeated team. Who is the last undefeated team? Well, if you follow college wrestling, you probably know that the 19-0 undefeated team in 2017, 2018 was Mizzou. Missouri was 19-0. Had a streak that ran from February 2017 to February of 2019. So a 2-year streak, essentially. And their loss coming to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State loves to take out teams as in those upsets. I mean, big win for Oklahoma State. Massive matchup. They had wins throughout the season over Illinois, Virginia Tech, UNC, Cornell, as well as Oklahoma State during that year. Whenever Ironman, one of the biggest matches was Ironman and Dean Heil. When Ironman actually pinned Dean Heil, that was a massive match. Of course, Heil, the two-time national champion. This was on their team with Jaden Ironman, who is now an Iowa Hawkeye, interestingly enough. Ernestine, Grant Leith, Willie Miklas, and Daniel Lewis. What a team there. These are some of the best undefeated teams, the 4 best programs of the last 5 years, arguably, just because of their records. These, you can see their records right here. Undefeated season since 2015. Only went back about 5 years just because, this has been some of the dominant teams. It's possible that Iowa and NC State both go undefeated this year, making it the first year that teams would go undefeated since the 2017-2018 season. Are you fans of these schools, or what team do you want to go undefeated? Can Iowa and NC State both go undefeated this year? Let me know in the comments below. Now, drinking on my Star Wars cup, let's discuss the last main topic of the day. And the 7th and last main topic of the day, let's discuss what are the best upcoming matches and duels to watch in February. I have, I believe, 5 or 6 of them for you, as well as a couple honorable mentions, but thrilling and exciting duels to watch in February. That's the last month of dual meet season, and it's going to be wild. So let's start out with one of my favorite upcoming duels, which is, of course, Campbell and App State, coming to you on Valentine's Day Eve. Take a date to the match because it's going to be a great time. Campbell versus App State. So this is a SoCon rivalry that I want to discuss. And, obviously, there's a lot of attention on Big 10, on Big 12, on those programs because there are a lot of ranked teams there. But I want to give some attention to some of these other programs too. So Campbell versus App State. This is a great rivalry that maybe not a lot of people outside of SoCon know about, but it's great. Last year, Campbell defeated App State for the first time under Coach Colette, which was a big victory for the team. Now, this match, Campbell has 5-6 ranked wrestlers coming into this match, whereas App State has just 3 coming in at a couple of different weight classes. So there are going to be some great matchups. Of course, Campbell has Noah Gonzer, Josh Howe, Andrew Morgan, Jerry Hino. Hino is going to have a very exciting and tough matchup with Kerry Miller, who is App State's ranked heavyweight. But App State, of course, has Cody Russell, Milner, and as well as a couple other guys in the last match. As I mentioned, Campbell won 19-17. This is sure to be a thrilling match coming at you in February. But let's move on to the next match, which is kind of one that just popped up onto my radar, which I don't know why I didn't have it on my radar before. But NC State and North Carolina. Obviously, North Carolina, big win. They just had a massive win over Virginia Tech and showed that they're a team to be reckoned with. NC State, at this point in the season, is undefeated. NC State and North Carolina, I'm calling this the Rumble in Raleigh. The Rumble in Raleigh, because it's going down at NC State, and I want to be there. I want to be there for this duel. Now, great matches coming in here. Of course, one of the best matches, Wilson and Zach Sherman. They faced off before a couple times. Wilson has won that match in the past. 157, a PIAA, a Pennsylvania matchup with AC Headley versus Hayden Hidley. That will be exciting to see. Hidley, maybe a little too dominant for AC, but AC is coming off of some strong wins, some exciting victories. 165, we get to see... it's a good chance to see Kennedy Monday wrestle again. Of course, he just had a big win over David McFadden, number 3 David McFadden. Tech followed him. Now we get to see him wrestle another ranked wrestler in Bullard, and that'll be great. Lots of toss-up matches. Lots of matches between ranked versus ranked wrestlers, unranked versus unranked wrestlers, and I think this is going to be a very good duel to watch. Good duel in North Carolina. Now, before I move on to the next duels, I want to talk about some honorable mentions. One that I was going to talk a little bit more about, but was NC State and Virginia Tech going down on February 14th. That will be a match that's Valentine's Day match. Were two undefeated programs. Now, of course, Virginia Tech with that loss to UNC kind of shifted UNC into my mostly anticipated duels. But NC State won the last two meetings, whereas Virginia Tech won the 7 years previous. I mean, this is just an ACC battle. Great matches. You're going to have Tariq Wilson versus Mitch Moore. Bullard versus McFadden, which is going to be their first meeting. Trent Hiley versus Hunter Bolin, which is their first meeting. And, just great matches. Hiley versus Bolin, yes. Both top 10 guys. And then NC State's just got some hammers. So anyways, as well as Virginia Tech. Other matches to watch out for. Ohio State versus Nebraska going down February 2nd. Pitt versus NC State going down February 1st. Last year, Pitt defeated NC State. That was the last loss from NC State. So, that's going to be pretty darn good. And Pitt has a couple other close matches. I mean, ACC just heated up massively after that UNC win. 4 teams, I believe, in the top 10 right now, which is excellent for the ACC. Another anticipated duel is Penn State versus Ohio State at the Bryce Jordan Center. Solid history here between both teams. Big rivalry if you're a Penn State or Ohio State fan. Big Big Ten rivalry. So, big matches here between one of the first at 133. I mean, Roman Bravo Young's tough matches just keep continuing onwards. He's going to be facing off against Decatur, which is going to be a good match. And then the matchup of the night is number 1 versus number 2 in Nick Lee versus Luke Pletcher. I mean, what a match that's going to be. We've seen both of these guys wrestle dominantly for the majority of the year, and it's just going to be a great matchup. Verclaren versus Sasso, another potential good match. Rocky Jordan versus Aaron Brooks. I'm in for it. I'm excited to see what happens there. And Rashid will be taking on Colin Moore. So, listen, I'm pumped for it. What match are you most excited for? Let's move on to another one. Iowa versus Oklahoma State. Iowa versus Oklahoma State. The last matchup was actually, this is part of Iowa's revenge tour. Iowa lost to them last year by a score of 27-12, getting beat pretty bad. We're going to see that Spencer Lee versus Nick Piccinini rematch from last year's duel. Of course, Lee avenged his loss at NCAA's, but not in the duels. So let's see how those two teams do how those two wrestlers do in the duels. I'm excited to see. Of course, last year Piccinini pinned Spencer Lee. I doubt that'll happen this year, but you never know. Anything can happen in Carver Hawkeye. Maybe Spencer Lee gets the pin this year. Anyways, at 149, we're going to see Pat Lugo versus Juan. Two top ranked wrestlers, 2 top 5 wrestlers. we're going to see, who deserves that number 1 spot, as well as Jacob Warner versus Gear. It's going to be their first meeting. So just many ranked wrestlers here wrestling, and it should be a solid duel. And that's the last weekend of college wrestling. Actually, this duel will be going down February 23rd. And then another match that's happening the exact same day, we're going to see the Valencias take on North Carolina. Arizona State and UNC. Excuse me, I keep wanting to say NC State and UNC. 149, solid matchup with Josh Maruka and Austin O'Connor. Last wrestled in 2018, where it was a close decision. 3-2 decision. Of course, that came in favor of Austin O'Connor. 157, we're going to see Teamer and Headley face off, whereas 65, we're going to see Shields and Monday, a top opponent for Monday to face off against. Shields had that last W in 2018. But Monday's been impressive this year, wrestling great all season, but really coming into his own this February. And then coming, that 74 through heavyweight is going to be kind of tough to beat for, North Carolina's going to have a tough time with Arizona State, with the Valencias, with Norfleet, with Tanner Hall. It's going to be tough to beat, but it should be a good match overall. That's happening actually in North Carolina, a duel that I'm going to try to get to if I can, but I mean, there are just a lot of great matches happening that weekend. So please let me know what matches you're looking forward to in February. Are you going to be attending any matches? Because I'm going to be going to every single duel that I can get to. Now, guys, that is going to do it for this week's show. Big show. I mean, if you're still listening at this point, thank you. Lots of great things going on in the Fanco wrestling world right now, in the Fanco wrestling community. Great feedback on a couple of the recent videos I want to talk about. Great feedback from responding to the Hawkeye report. That was a very fun video that I wanted to get ahead of and discuss, and a lot of positive feedback from you. I don't say it enough, but thank you so much to all of you who watch these videos, and just comment below and like these videos and share them with their friends. I mean, it means so much to me that I'm able to kind of give some of my wrestling knowledge to you, but just discuss with what you have to say. Now, that's going to do it for this week's show. I don't really have a sign-off phrase at this point. I've my intro, stop stalling, but no sign-off phrase. So, anyways, until next time, guys, that's going to be it.